Okay, today we're going to talk about clearing fractions. This is a really useful skill to have, especially when you're solving for equations. You don't want to deal with fractions or try to make common denominators. If you get rid of them right away, you have some nice numbers to work with. So we're going to go ahead and go through some examples of these. Before we do that, I have kind of 4 steps to think about when you go ahead to clear fractions. First is finding the LCD, which is the least common denominator. That could be looking at all the denominators in your given equation. You find the lowest number that will clear each of those fractions. And we'll look at those in the example. Second, multiply every single term by the LCD, and I capitalized every and underlining it now. It's really, really important that you're multiplying every single term. Do not just deal with the fractions. Every term needs to be handled by the LCD. Third, simplify once you do the multiplication, and then complete the problem from there. Your fractions will be gone. Your life will be a lot easier. So let's go down and look at one example. So our first example is to solve for x. The equation is 1/2 x plus 3/4 equals 5/8. Normally you're going to look at that and get freaked out immediately. Too many fractions. I don't want to deal with it. So what we're going to do is clear those fractions. So first thing, find the LCD. Always our first step. So number 1, find that LCD. So if I look at all these fractions, the denominator, I have 2, 4, and 8 for my denominators. The lowest common denominator there is going to be our 8. So my LCD is 8. And the LCD does not always have to be a denominator that is shown in the problem. It's just the least common denominator given the numbers you have to work with. So if I take that 8, my second step is to take every single term and multiply it by 8. And in this problem we have 3 separate terms. We have 1/2 x, we have 3/4, and we have 5/8. So if I take that second step, I'm going to take each of these numbers. So I have 1/2 x multiplied by 8. I have 3/4, I'm going to multiply by 8. And I have 5/8, I'm going to multiply by 8. Some students feel more comfortable by putting 8 over 1 on each of these, just so you kind of know, even though it's a whole number, it is kind of still a fraction, 8 over 1. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply and simplify. So I'm going to do steps 2 and 3 at the same time. So the first term, when I multiply through 1/2 x times 8, I get 8 over 2. So if I have 8 on top and 2 on the bottom, I'll write it out to start. 8 over 2x plus 24 over 4 equals 40 over 8. Now from here I'm going to simplify. So again, this is going to be kind of step 3 down here. So step 3 is simplifying. And I'm going to do, 8 over 2 is going to give me a 4x. 24 over 4 is going to leave me with 6. And 40 over 8 is going to leave me with a 5. Looking at step 3, compared to our original equation, we're already in a much easier place to solve this equation. Now some of you might have been looking at this step I did here. So these 2 steps from here down to here. You can do that in one step and get down simplified. You can say, okay, if I have 8 on top and 2 on the bottom, I know that's going to clear to a 4. You know here if you have an 8 on top and 4, the 4 becomes a 1, the 8 becomes a 2. You can simplify this and do that all in one step. But I wanted to show you each one out here. And then lastly, once we have this simplified equation, our last step here, I'll change my colors, is just to solve. So if I solve this equation, I'm going to subtract 6 on both sides. I'm left with a -1 and divide by 4. So x is -1/4. So now let's try another example. So example 2, again we're solving for x, we're dealing with some kind of equation. I have x over 3, which again is the same thing as 1/3 x, and you can change it to that if you're more comfortable that way. Minus 4 equals 4/9. So again, first step here, find that LCD. So my first step, my LCD, if I look at this, I'm just going to change this a little bit. I'm going to make this 4 over 1. Okay, so each of these terms, my denominators are 3, 1, and 9. So if I think about my lowest common denominator, here it's going to be 9. So my LCD is 9. And if you remember from the previous slide, my second step here is going to be multiply every single term by that LCD. So if I'm on step 2, I'm going to multiply every term by the LCD. So x over 3 is a term. I multiply it by 9. And I'm going to do 9 over 1. 4 is a term. So I'm going to do 4 over 1 times 9 over 1. And then equals that last term is 4/9. I multiply again by 9 over 1. You don't have to have 9 over 1. You can just have 9, but it's sometimes a little easier to see with that 1 on the bottom. Now, third step is to simplify. So if I simplify this first term, if I have 9 up top here and a 3 on the bottom, it becomes a 1. This is a 3. I'm left with 3x. So a little different than the last slide. I'm showing you kind of that shortcut step here. Second term, nothing is canceling from top to bottom, so I literally just multiplied 9 times 4. So I'm getting my 36. In this last term on the right-hand side of the equal sign, my 9s have a 9 on top and 9 on bottom, so those become 1s. They cancel to a 1, so I'm just left with 4. And again, you notice how much simpler this equation is once my fractions are gone. Final step, step number 4, is just to solve. So if I solve this equation, I'm going to add 36 to both sides. So I have a 3x equals 40. And I'm going to divide by 3. My x is 40 over 3. Not a pretty answer, but you can leave it as a fraction. Don't have to deal with the decimal. And my x is 40 over 3. And of course, what I'm not doing in both of these is we're focusing on the clearing fractions portion. You always, always, always check your answer. And we talked about that in class, solving equations. But for this purpose, it's just about the clearing the fractions. So there are 2 examples shown out for you. Take a look at them, use them. This last slide is for you. Try this one on your own. We'll go through it in class tomorrow.